I recently spent 10 days road tripping through Norway and staying in cabins far away from civilization out in wild nature so that I could do nothing. And it was really good for me. Let me tell you about this trip and how I put it together in such a way that it helped me gain clarity and make progress on some of the things I'd been struggling with in my life. So, like most people, I have spent the majority of the last 18 months in various forms of lockdown and semi-lockdown. And like most people, this has not been great for my mental health and not great for my overall well-being. I've also lately repeatedly had this frustrating experience of trying to start something new, and then something interferes. Either I get sick or injured, or some appointment gets cancelled, or some other emergency comes up. And I've just had repeatedly this experience of trying something and then feeling like life comes and smacks it out of my hands. And of course, all of this is pretty demoralizing. In short, I have just noticed like a general decline. I have felt less motivated, less energized. I have had more frequent and longer bouts of depression. I'm less healthy. I'm less in shape. Like things are kind of on a downward trajectory. And most frustratingly, I noticed that some problems that I thought I dealt with a long time ago are like creeping back in. One of the ways I noticed this is in essentially my sense of self-worth and confidence. When I was much younger, I struggled a lot. I had basically no sense of self-worth at all, and I totally lacked confidence as well. And over many years of self-development work, I got much better at that. And I got to a point where I felt great about myself and I had really deep and strong confidence. And in recent months, I felt like some of these old thought patterns and behavior patterns creep back in. And my confidence level is much, much lower. I have more self-doubt and I have more of kind of a negative and cynical worldview. And like I said, these are all things that I'd already spent so much time working on and improving, and it's so frustrating to feel these things come back. But look, I'm not one to just roll over and take the new problems in my life as they come. And this is why I went to Norway. I went to Norway on my own with no plans other than to rent a car and drive north and simply explore the countryside. And if you're wondering why Norway, well, it's because this country is utterly beautiful. And while I was there, what I mainly did was drive, take walks in the countryside, think, and write. And that's it. With hours and hours of nothing much to do, I very quickly felt a shift in perspective. I very quickly felt like all the problems that I'm usually this close to, I'm gaining distance from, and I'm starting to see a big picture. And I gained much more clarity about what was going on and what I could do to solve my problems. And I'll tell you a lot more about what I learned in upcoming videos, but the first and most important insight I gained is also the reason I'm making this video right here. What I realized is that the struggles I've been facing are an opportunity. It's an opportunity for me to take everything that I have learned over years and years of personal development work and years of working with and helping other people, to take all that and apply it and to document and share my process as I do it. Reaching a low point in some areas of my life is an opportunity for me to rebuild myself and document the process and share it with other people. Because ultimately, that's what I want to be doing with my time. That's why I started Icario. I want to share and bring this kind of stuff to as many people as possible. And I've done it before. I have built myself up from a really, really low point in life to an extremely high point in life before. But last time, I didn't share it with anyone. I just did it for myself. And this time, it's going to be different. So that's what I want to do. And part of that is that I want to lay it all out there. I don't want to hide behind a public persona and pretend that everything is hunky-dory in my life or hope that nobody notices. And I also don't want to walk back my ambitions and pretend like I'm not capable of more. I want to do the work and I want to show you how I do it. And let's get started right here. This video right here is step one. This is the start. Because like I hinted at before, this Norway trip wasn't random or accidental. I designed this trip in a specific way so that I would get the most out of it. And here's how I did that and how you can do the same. And by the way, traveling all the way to Norway is optional. So here's the approach for when you feel overwhelmed and when you feel like problems are grinding you down and you lack perspective. Here's what to do. The first element is to take a step back in a big way. When you're struggling with different life issues and basically life in general, you can easily get stuck in a really short-sighted loop where you basically never catch a break because there's always another fire to put out. And it's almost like you get tunnel vision, right? You just can't see the big picture anymore. One of the best ways to solve this problem is to take a big step away. And environment change is a key here. If you are spending all day sitting in front of your computer screen, dealing with all your life's problems, it's unlikely that you'll get a really insightful, creative idea while sitting in front of those computer screens and being distracted by all the noise that is keeping you stuck where you are right now. I chose a road trip through Norway, which was something I had on my bucket list for a while anyway, in order to give myself this change of perspective. But you don't have to go that far. I mean, you can probably hop on a bicycle and ride it for like 30 minutes to an hour to be somewhere completely different and truly stepped away from your usual environment. So it's all about simply getting out of the environment where all of your troubles and all your overwhelm is happening. The second component of this is really important. Give yourself boring time. Give yourself time where you're basically doing nothing. For me, driving for long stretches is something that really works wonders, but it has to be done the right way. Because nowadays, in any newer car, you can hook it up to your phone and you probably have network coverage, 4G, 5G, all this kind of stuff. And you can be driving along, being totally plugged in. And you can have the car read out your text messages as they come in, and you can have notifications and all kinds of stuff happening. And that will not give you this benefit. The key here is to do the driving or the walking or the just sitting and thinking without any of these inputs. You do it while you're not listening to the radio and chatter, while you're not listening to podcasts, while you're not having other inputs. You do it with either no input at all or just listening to music. One reason why a road trip or a long train journey works so well is because you're in this situation where you basically can't do anything. You just got to cover these miles. You just got to sit out the time until you arrive at your destination. There's basically nothing to do. And that can be really good. Initially, it's boring, but once you're in that kind of boring, less stimulated mode, suddenly your mind starts to work on a different level. It's like your mind shifts gears and you will have creative ideas and new perspectives and a different way of thinking about things. But again, the key point here is you have to remove the usual noise, stimulation, and distractions for this to work. The third aspect here is nature and exposure to natural landscapes. There's a phenomenon called biophilia or the biophilia effect, which we're tapping into here. Research shows that simply being exposed to nature, being surrounded by trees, by a natural environment, being at the seaside, being basically away from civilization and seeing nature and feeling nature around yourself is healing and is extremely good for people. Maybe you've heard of the idea of forest bathing, which is literally just taking people and putting them in a forest so they can kind of soak in that sensation of being in nature. And it is a relatively new phenomenon, but there are some interesting studies that show that this really does de-stress people, but it also improves various health markers in people. So this is one of the reasons why I chose to go to Norway, because I'd always wanted to explore more of the landscapes there, and it just gave me an opportunity to be really out in the wild, to be so far away from civilization that I didn't hear a single sound from cars passing or a city nearby or anything like that. And just walking through landscapes, just feeling the weather, the sensation of the change in temperatures of night and day and rain and dry and so on, just like being exposed to nature. That itself is really healing, and it helps with this process of gaining clarity and finding a way forward. And finally, the last important component here is that we want to let things settle and then process them. And my favorite way of processing is through writing. So after a long day of driving and some walks, I've had all these thoughts and a lot of the noise in my mind has kind of settled, almost like the sediment in a glass. You know, if you just leave it sit there, it just settles and calms down and the water clears. That's the kind of effect that I feel in my mind if I've given myself enough of this do nothing time and nature exposure. And then I'm ready to sit down and write. And what I'll be writing about is going to be completely different from what I could have come up with had I stayed in my old environment and had I stayed plugged in to all of the noise. For me, the process of writing out my thoughts is like the middle step between thinking and action. It really helps me translate my thinking, my ideas into practical, actionable steps. And this is why I took many opportunities to just sit down and write. And again, keep the stimulation low. I don't want to have loads of other inputs. I just want to be able to sit there, let my thoughts wander, and put my thoughts on the page. All in all, I loved this experience, and it was extremely good for me and gave me much more clarity and direction for what to do next. And in my next video, I'll share with you a framework that is really useful for this kind of process of digging yourself out of a hole. So that is coming soon. In the meantime, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I shared here, and maybe you can share some ideas of how you can apply these same principles in your own life, even if you can't take a whole 10-day trip through some country somewhere. So I'd love to hear how you want to apply this in your own life and maybe insights you gain when you try this out. So go ahead and leave a comment below.